Mr. Taylor, you mentioned that you're 30 miles away from Mississippi State University, a land-grant institution and leader in research, but you're not in a major technology hub. So what unique challenges do folks in your position have? You got 1,200 employees. You'd like to hire another 40 back. And I mean, you're the big employer and economic engine in that area. What suggestions do you have for to make it easier for small and medium-sized businesses who are not in these large hubs?
Yeah, those that are not in those corridors, like we are, we're distanced from the distribution hubs, so that distance plays a factor in timing of deliveries. One thing that comes to my mind is that from that distance, usually interstate highway systems are used, of course, and then state surface highway systems are used. At least in Mississippi, and I think in many rural parts of the nation, this infrastructure bill that's being discussed and negotiated here in the Capitol now is vitally important. But I would say that if there's anything that can be done in that regard is not only refurbish our highways, refurbish our bridges to get them to standard, to use as many alternatives to source components to us and then ship our products out, but also improve. We build lifting equipment, and we see the customer base wanting bigger equipment because their machine tools, their processes are putting out bigger packages for efficiency. Well, those bigger packages usually take weight and impact the load limits that we currently have in our nation. If the infrastructure system could be passed and it could cause an improvement in capacity, not just the surface, but the capacity of transporting goods and services, rural facilities like us could have a better application for delivering our end product or getting more component per delivery or per truck or per rail.
So strengthen our roads as we build them.
Strengthen, yes.
Mr. Miller, you mentioned liability, a liability concern. We're going to want people to participate in this monitoring program. That'll be voluntary, won't it? We're not going to, the government's not going to make people do that. What will the absence of a liability protection provision have on the willingness of companies to participate?
Thank you, Senator Wicker. There are some very significant considerations that companies have to consider when sharing the type of information we're talking about, supply chain risk information. You know, oftentimes that type of information is quite candidly derogatory information about suppliers, you know, somewhere in their supply chain. And there's just a whole number of state and other causes of action that, you know, expose them to very significant legal risk if they were to, you know, say something, you know, about a supplier, for instance, that, you know, hey, we you know, this is a bad company, right? We don't even have to get into details. Things like tortious interference with contract, breach of contract, defamation. I mean, these are all very serious, you know, business disparagement. There's a number of different really significant legal risks, and companies want to share this information, but there's not a clear pathway to doing it without those type of liability protections.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm going to take a little liberty. Does anybody want to tell us we didn't quite get the CHIPS Act right and we need to make an amendment or two? If anybody would like to make a suggestion in that regard, either now or on the record, that would be helpful to us. Anyone? We'll take that for the record. And is it perfect? Raise your hands. Is it perfect? I think we're on to something. I assume I'm supposed to. Yes, Dr. Gill.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Wicker. I think it's an...
Reaching for that microphone.
That's right, I am reaching. I do think it's an excellent piece of legislation. I think the consideration that we should have is how do we have a sustained effort throughout the decade, right? The consideration, of course, and the priority is to get it passed and implemented and executed properly in the next 5 years. But the semiconductor industry is notorious for having to engage in long-term planning and long-term execution of roadmaps. So I think that, you know, hopefully this bipartisan act and consensus of getting this done will also be the basis and for the success that we enable with that to sustain it over time.
Thank you. I yield.